What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. We are recording on New Year's Eve because we are old and washed. It is our last podcast of the year, also our last War Room of the year, which will run tomorrow morning. I'm realizing now I'm wearing the same thing I was wearing when we recorded on Postgame Pod on Sunday. I did wash it in between. I am in a different location, as you can see. Connor, how you doing? How you feeling?
I think this is the week you don't have to wash that. Like you could just
That's fair,
wear. Life's a little different for me now because doing a fantasy show at NBC, like we take off Christmas Day and we take off New Year's Day, but other than that, we still go in the studio and do the show. But this was the time of year before I was in front of the microphone and camera, like more in the corporate world. I mean, I would probably like live in sweats and the t-shirt for 5 days straight in the same way. So, and the Jets have kind of taken on that mentality. It feels like they're doing the same thing. So it's all very fitting. I'm good though.
Yeah, we mirror the team's personality by this point of the season as we head into Week 18, 4:25 kickoff against the Miami Dolphins. Get excited, everybody!
Oh
Technically,
God,
the Dolphins.
425. Jeez.
Somehow the Dolphins are alive for a playoff spot. Somehow the Jets could pick as high as number 2. They're currently at number 7. Effectively, every team that loses in front of them or wins in front of them, if they lose, they jump up a corresponding spot. So get familiar with teams currently 2 through 6 and root for them. I will never tell you how to root for the Jets, and certainly if they could have a hand in Miami missing the playoffs, are we going to shed any tears about them winning? But man, it'd be really nice to pick 2nd, 3rd, or 4th instead of 7th, 8th, or 9th, especially with this team who is like openly like, I cannot wait to get to free agency and I'm done with this season.
Yep.
So just give me like, before we get into some of the latest coaching rumors, and we'll kind of cover a little bit of everything today, remind people like what the perspective difference is between picking like 3rd or 4th or 8th or 9th this year.
Well, okay. So 3rd, in my opinion, could be colossal because, right now the best player in the draft is Travis Hunter, who plays both ways in college, won the Heisman. He, I think as it stands, plans to try to do both at the NFL level. He's a corner with, premier ball skills. He's a wide receiver. Ironically, that he has some similarities to Garrett. When I scouted him over summer, that was the first thing that jumped out to me. Some of the movements in that wiry frame, and once again, ball skills, springy, slippery after the catch. Like he's, if you're looking for a closest recent high-end comp, like there's a lot of similarities with Garrett now, but he also plays corner and he takes away the football at an alarming rate. So if you're picking 2nd or 3rd, you all of a sudden fall into that range if quarterbacks go in front of you. Now, if you're picking, 6th or 7th, you can still have a shot at a Mason Graham high-end D tackle next to Quinnen, which is big. Same thing for a Kelvin Banks, who maybe is your right tackle of the future, a good tackle prospect from Texas. And then if you start to get, like if the Jets won this game and picked 10th or something along the lines of that, then you're looking at it, you're like, you're in territory where you're at a giant risk of not getting a blue chip player. Honestly, it's just that kind of class. There's not a lot of blue chip players. And I think the teams that pick in the top 6 or 7 will be pretty happy with what they're able to walk away with in this draft. And then it feels like the door just kind of opens up where maybe the same caliber of prospect exists from 10 to 25. And that seems like an outrageous thing to say, but that's really how drafts can go at times, depending how many blue chip players there are. So I've been having fun with this. I've been joking around with this. We did the draft order pod on NFL Stock Exchange. And if you believe in the Jets miracle, right? The Jets pick it too. It's called the Jets Miracle Parlay. The toughest leg of it is the Browns are 18-point underdogs against the Ravens right now.
Just 18?
So Browns money line plus 950. And then you obviously need, these parts aren't insane. It's just wild if they all happen. The Patriots got to beat the Bills backups. The Giants have to beat the Eagles backups. The Panthers, this one's pretty tough. The Panthers have to beat the Falcons, although it's not that crazy if you watch the Falcons recently. The Titans have to beat the Texans backups. Jacksonville has to beat the Colts, which after what we saw from the Colts last week, it's like, okay, the Colts are looking just awful right now. And then that should cover us. I think that's all of them. So that would put the Jets picking 2nd overall if the Jets lost. And if you put $5 on this parlay, I think I missed a leg as well. You'd win like $7,000.
Ooh.
So
I mean, worth a little dabble. Why not?
it's absolutely hilarious, right? It's like utterly ridiculous. Yeah, it is worth a little dabble there. So it's the Jets miracle parlay. So anyway, the Jets realistically, if you were setting odds, I would guess they pick sixth. Where it gets really tricky is the Jets have 4 wins, and then it goes to strength of schedule. Say one of New England or Tennessee or the Giants gets that 4th win. As it stands today, and this can change because strength of schedule flips on wins week by week, but it's pretty close to the end here. Tennessee and the Giants have a higher strength of schedule than the Jets, which means the Jets would move ahead of one of Tennessee or the Giants if they won, which is that's insane when you think about it. They're not going to move ahead of New England because their strength of schedule is so low. But let's say the Giants beat the Eagles backups and the Titans beat the Texans backups. Okay, so now the Jets are picking 5th, I believe, or 4th. Like, that's not out of the range of outcomes in this scenario. Can Jacksonville beat the Colts? Can Carolina upset the Falcons? You're hoping for one of those two things. So there's a world where the Jets are picking 4th or 5th, and then you're sitting there and you're going, okay, is one of Cam Ward or Shedeur going to fall to us? And that's a long combo. And the answer is probably not, but it's a possibility. Or one of the best players in the draft, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham, a wide receiver like Tet McMillan. So, yeah, Abdul Carter, pass rusher from Penn State. Like, the Jets, as it stands, now if they're playing Snoop Huntley, you get a little chicken feeling. You're like, oh boy.
Yeah.
But if the Jets kind of just go out and lose, I think 2 of these teams in front of them will win, and the Jets could easily be picking in the top 5.
I guess for me, the question is, if the Jets are picking in the top 5 and the right teams are picking in front of them, how aggressive or serious would you be about going to get Cam Ward? I feel like, if I'm wrong, let me know if I'm wrong, but I feel like you prefer him as QB1
I do,
over
yeah,
Shedeur.
yeah.
I can't picture a world where Shedeur is ever on the Jets. I just can't. I could be wrong. I just don't ever see it happening. But Ward,
best for both sides not to happen.
Yeah, I don't see that being a smart marriage for either party. So let's say they're picking 4th, and some of the teams picking in front of them are like the Pats, who aren't going to take a quarterback, maybe the Browns, because they're stuck with Watson, don't take a quarterback. Like, are you trading up a spot to get Ward? Obviously, if he's there, it's a different conversation, but is he the kind of guy where you're like, you know what? Yeah, let's go from 5 to 3 and grab him and give up, a couple 2s next year or 1 next year or something like that. Is he worth that kind of swing?
So if I was a new regime, I wouldn't move to get him. I would, if he fell into your lap and say the board broke, let's for argument's sake say the Jets are picking 5th. And let's say the players that came off the board in some order was Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham, and we'll say like a Kelvin Banks or Abdul Carter. And then you're looking around, you're going like, oh boy, like this, this thing really, some of the players we really liked are gone. And Cam Ward's staring us in the face. Then the regime, depending on how they grade him, like then it's a combo. But if I'm a new regime and I have a little bit of security, this isn't the class that I'm moving weight around to go get a guy. I'm just not doing that. I would just kick the can down the road, figure it out then. I guess the regime could be looking at it. Say you're living in a world where you get an average coach and you think, oh boy, we're going to win 8 games next year. Then we're going to have to trade even more to go get a quarterback. But the quarterback class should, in theory, be better. So that's a scenario. As I sit here today, my answer would be I wouldn't move for any of them. But if one fell to me, I could talk myself into taking Cam Ward and him being in a good situation behind a pretty good offensive line. Garrett Wilson is here. I like Cam Ward quite a bit. I think that it's a hard conversation because we were spoiled last year where I thought Caleb, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Penix were all pretty high-end quarterback prospects where I think all 4 of those guys as prospects were better than anyone in this group.
Yep.
I think Shedeur and Cam Ward, and I'm higher on Ward, they would fall closer to the bucket that McCarthy was in for me, and that's a whole nother combo. And then Bo Nix, I didn't dislike Bo Nix. I just thought he doesn't have the ceiling of a quarterback that you're going to go to war with. Like, I wasn't taking Bo Nix in the top 15. I thought he was a end of round 1, top of round 2 guy, and the ceiling just won't ever be there. And we're going to learn about this, but like, I'm not a believer that Bo Nix is ever going to go toe to toe with Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar. Like, I know Stroud didn't have a great year, but physically Stroud in the AFC. Maybe I'm wrong. Time will tell. So yeah, that's how I would work that out right now, where, I mean, I think Cam Ward, he's a little wild at times, but he's got a good arm. He's a big-time playmaker. He's got the right DNA, which has been a big problem at this position for the Jets. And it's not just like, oh, he's a winner. It's like, no, he was a nobody recruit. He started at Incarnate Ward. He won the Jerry Rice Award for the best player at that level of college football. Then he went to Washington State, and then he kept transferring up. And it's one thing to transfer up. It's another thing to transfer all the way up to Miami and then really be a Heisman guy. Like, that's a different level of guy. So, but once again, like, a new regime, I don't think should be moving mountains to go up and get a quarterback in this class.
Well, since you mentioned him, and I know we've gotten this question in a few spots, where would you rank McCarthy comparatively to what the options are last year, this year, and what would you be willing to give up for him? So basically, like, if someone was like, yeah, all right, CR, like, rate JJ McCarthy between last year's quarterbacks and this year's quarterbacks, and then, you know, are you just trading your first round pick for him straight up? Are you trading down? Like, where do you think the value could be there? Because it feels like the Vikings have to stick with Darnold, and they might want to be smart and just have 2 quarterbacks, but you never know. You know, they go to the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold and they give him a 4-year maxed out contract. Did they just say, look, like, let's get what we can from McCarthy. We have Daniel Jones as the backup, and let's not muddy the water at all here. Where does McCarthy fit into this overall picture?
So I had McCarthy 33rd overall last year and QB5 in a good draft class. Like, admittedly, last year was a pretty good draft, all things considered. I think that puts, you know, people can kind of understand that now when they conceptualize, like, the Jets got Olu at 11, and it's like, damn, we got a tackle that looks like that at 11. That's a damn good draft class when a tackle like that is at 11. And Brian Thomas Jr. wasn't taken in the top 15, and you watch him play in Jacksonville, and you're like, damn, what is a dude doing like that doing outside the top 15? Who, contrary to the Jets, I had 11th overall, by the way. I know Malachi Corley was a better prospect than Brian Thomas Jr. But
he hurt his elbow doing something on Sunday. Just unbelievable.
That's what's left to say. Yeah. But so McCarthy, I had his QB5 in that class. I think I would have Cam Ward slightly ahead of him by grade. But if you're talking about trading for him, and then McCarthy and Shedeur is like an interesting conversation to me. I'm not the biggest Shedeur Sanders guy. I don't think he's a bad player by any stretch of the means. I don't know if it goes back to like, how much can you elevate a team? And out of structure, I don't know how much he's going to be able to do that. So I would have Cam Ward probably ahead of McCarthy, Shedeur, and Bo Nix. I mean, I had McCarthy obviously ahead of Bo Nix. McCarthy, there is things that people need to just like can't discuss. He's had 2 knee surgeries now. I don't know what that looks like. I mean, he had his meniscus repaired after preseason, and that was a full repair. That wasn't a trim. And then they had to clean it up again. So what does he look like medically? I don't know. And he's somebody that I thought really needed time to develop because of the structure of the Michigan offense, what he didn't have to do. Like, you watch JJ McCarthy's games his last year at Michigan when they won the national title. He never had to throw for 250 yards. And I'm not holding that against him. I'm saying that's a growth pattern of what's on your plate and what's not. He's got a good arm. He moves well enough. And I think that what we saw in preseason from O'Connell, he was starting to really learn how to process in such a short time. I would not obviously give up their first rounder for him, and I wouldn't even pick swap it. Like, it's the driving the car off the lot thing. Like, McCarthy was taken, and he needed a surgery, and now we don't know what he is. He's a total mystery. I would give up the second round pick for him. Why not? Like, at that point, you're like, okay, let's see what he's got, because then you're kind of equating him closer to how the Titans drafted Will Levis, where if you took Will Levis in the top 40 and it didn't work, no one's going to fire you. But if you took Will Levis in the top 10 and he sucked, you should probably be fired. If the Jets traded their first round pick for JJ McCarthy, or even swapped it, because the Vikings will be picking like 27th, and he stinks, you should be fired. But if you traded a second round pick for him, and then maybe it's a 2027 conditional third, right? Depending on like McCarthy started 80% of the games over 2 years and now it becomes a 2. What if he does that? Well, okay, it was worth the second 2. But no, I look at him as a high-end flyer rather than the answer, I think is how I'd price him.
Yeah, I don't think any Jet fan would have a problem throwing a second rounder and something else at that, because it's going to depend on the coaching staff, but you're going to want potentially a name that brings a little more buzz, right? Because it's kind of going to be that, or probably like Tyrod and Fields, basically, in a Rodgers isn't here world, which feels more likely than not at this point. We can argue till our faces are blue, but it just feels like it's going to go that way. And if you could promise me that Tyrod was going to start 12 games at least next year, I would say it's an absolute no-brainer to move on from Rodgers and just give Tyrod the job. Team likes him. He knows the offense. He can still play.
Might be a better player than Aaron Rodgers right now, by the way.
I mean, the offense moves with him in. Garrett, not too subtle with how he was talking about it. And I think you don't have to scrape too deep to kind of get a feel for how the Jets locker room is likely divided up right now. And if you can tell me look, we're going to sign Fields for a 1-year deal. We're going to have Jordan Travis, whatever he may be. Tyrod's going to play 12 games for you. Okay, that's a perfect bridge situation in my mind. Because Tyrod will be fine for those 12 games. He'll probably go 6-6 or whatever. And could you get enough over the other 5 where you're around 500? Whereas if they brought Rodgers back, it's probably the same deal. They're probably around 500, but with a much bigger sideshow attached to it and maybe further alienation of the young players in the team. Because I do think when he plays, Tyrod could play, but he always seems to get hurt, right? That's the fear with him. Now,
I think what you're arguing is the 2017 McCown season.
Yes. Could he do a version of that, which really is kind of the season Rodgers has given the Jets in some ways. People are oh, this is the best Jets quarterback season since Namath. It's not really. This is the McCown season, and McCown just got hurt and missed 3 games or 4 games or whatever at the end of the year. McCown played at the exact same level that Rodgers played at this year. And McCown also randomly ran for 4 or 5 touchdowns that year, if I'm remembering correctly, which Rodgers hasn't brought that element to the offense. So I watched both those seasons. I watched every snap of both of them multiple times. The level of quarterback play has been similar. It pains me to say this because I'm not as big as fan, but Fitzpatrick's season was better than Rodgers' season, across the board. Just was. Now, he had Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker and Ghost Chan Gailey cooking it up. I get it, but
but Rodgers has Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, their offense was better week to week. They scored a ton of points all the time. The Jets can't score with Rodgers at quarterback, and at least Fitzpatrick, for all his flaws, threw the ball down the field. Throw the ball out. I can live with Rodgers bombing it down the field. But the dink and dunk crap at this point, it's 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Yes, is that better than Zach Wilson? Sure. Is it better than Bryce Petty? Sure. Is it better than rookie year Geno here? Sure. In reality, it's okay. He's throwing 1.5 touchdowns per game. 10 interceptions, in today's NFL, is a decent amount. And let's dig a little deeper on the 24 touchdowns. How many of them were shovel passes or 1-yard speed outs? When are we I'm not touchdowns are touchdowns, but they're not a lot of 40-yard ropes down the field. You had a Garrett Wilson freak one-handed catch, kind of 2 of them against Houston. You had a shovel pass to Isaiah Davis, a shovel pass to Breece Hall a couple times, and a 1-yard speed out to Conklin and Gibson earlier this season. So the context matters around these numbers. On paper, it's fine. If Tyrod was playing, do I think he could have comparable numbers and add some running juice? Yeah. And in a bridge year, you don't want a high maintenance bridge. You want a low maintenance bridge when you're transitioning to a new regime. Right. So that is, look, that I'm trying not to be so rigid in being I am planting my flag. There's absolutely no way you can bring Aaron Rodgers back. I think at this point it's for the best for everyone if he's not back. I'm trying to keep a slight open mind that if they hire Vrabel and he's I want Aaron here for a year, we're going to make it work. Could I be convinced? Sure. Do I think that's going to happen? No. And I think it's likely over, and I think that's the right decision. And in a normal world where the Jets were ran like a normal team, Tyrod would have started against Buffalo and he'd be starting against Miami, and you'd be seeing what he looks like in the offense, and it would be already decided at this point that this didn't work. You're going to be 42. Let's go our separate ways. And maybe that is decided, but there's no one running the Jets right now. So Rodgers is I'm going to get my 500 touchdown pass and then whatever, do it.